What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another album review, and today I am talking about the latest offering from The Absence with their self-titled. Also comes out on March 29th, this time on Listenable Insanity Records, and this is the band's 6th album overall, and another full disclosure thing, this is the first time I've ever checked out The Absence. Of course, I knew the name, considering I first heard about this band courtesy of the Cannibal Corpse documentary, and knowing that The Absence got to open up for Goat Horror, Black Dahlia Murder, and Cannibal Corpse on a tour during the Kill Tour for Cannibal. But I never got around to checking them out. But this is a Tampa, Florida-based melodic death metal band, and I'll just say it straight up, they flat out worship the Gothenburg sound, like particularly At the Gates, which, not a bad thing, after all, At the Gates, arguably the greatest Swedish melodic death metal band of all time, though you could argue Edge of Sanity could have a hat, or a ring in the hat, you never really know, or throw their hat in the ring, whatever that expression is. But anyways, so with this album, I didn't know quite what to expect, considering this was the first time I've ever checked this band out, but holy shit, I was greeted right away to some At the Gates worship. With the opening track, Communion Carbonized, right away you get like that Slaughter of the Soul type of energy to it. Like, it's very thrashy with the riffing and the rhythms, but the melodies that come in feel very much like At the Gates. But then on this track, it does transition into like more of an monomarth double time rhythm, which is really, really cool to kind of break up the more thrashy moments. But, of course, one of the big tropes, and was kind of one of the benefits, but yet one of the things that kind of hindered the album, so it was kind of like a catch-22. The lead melodies that happen in the choruses of these songs. Granted, that could be a bit of a trope within melodic death metal nowadays, but while it was cool to hear some nice, tasty melodies on top of the choruses, I do feel like they do it a little bit too often on this album and don't really have like a true heavy chorus that can like really get the troops going in battle without it now necessarily sounding like it's just going to soar into the sky. So it's like a blessing and a curse with this album having those guitar melodies on top of the choruses. But I will say the leads, like the proper true blues solos, for the most part were pretty good. Granted, they can be a little bit repetitive and a little bit formulaic, but still, they knew how to execute these leads quite well. The Silent Eye kind of starts off a little bit on like the punky thrash side, kind of more in spirit of classic Swedish death metal to some degree, but even some groove comes in here, and this introduces another tool in the toolbox, and that is groove. Like, they're able to implement some groove to kind of break certain parts up. But I also like how the mood gets a little bit subdued and gets a little bit more atmospheric before it unleashes into like a nice death metal triplet chug, but with great harmonies on top. Vagrant Death, this one, while it has that At the Gates feel, there's also some like classic Swedish death metal overtones like Entombed, Dismember, and even when it gets chuggy and groovy, kind of like Bloodbath a little bit. But the breakdown, one of the heavier moments on the album, we get this heavy breakdown, but you still get guitar harmonies on top to kind of add dynamic. Planetary Mortuary, this one kind of starts off a little bit different. It starts off closer to Death Doom a little bit, kind of like a more melodic Hooded Menace, kind of like the opening leads on a song from Never Cross the Dead. Like, it has those more darker, sinister melodies on top, and this song actually has more of a sinister overtone on top of everything. Double time gallops, but with a nice sinister groove, but the leads rip, and there's even a tapping section that comes up, which doesn't really appear on the rest of the album. Surface of a Dead World, it was like the middle track to kind of break up the first half and the second half, but it was a beautiful interlude with the acoustic guitars and great electric guitar harmonies before it gets into Grieving Winds, where it gets into this really cool gallop of a blah, 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 blah. But with more like nasty classic death metal riffs going on as opposed to the melodic death metal style. And then it goes back and forth between being thrashy and groovy, and even the second time, like this track, as well as Vagrant Death and the closer, Breeding Hysterics, introduce blast beats, which is not something I come to expect out of a lot of melodic death metal. I expect more of the double time or thrashy rhythms as opposed to blast beats. But there's also a Death Doom break, which was pretty cool. Then we get to Fleshwalker. Starts off with more beautiful acoustic guitars at the start before you get this like beautiful melody on top of like thrashy aggression. But it does get doomy again later in the song, but with more melancholic melodies, I guess you could say. Escape Artist. This one is like Triplet City, whether it be the Triplet Swings or Triplet Chugs. But then again, you still get some like thrashy, groovy pockets, and even some D beats, like punky D beats going on. But then the closing track, Breeding Hysterics, this one, while it was a good song, I felt just kind of sounded like most of the rest of the songs of the album. It's got that At the Gates riffing to it, triplet swings, harmonized riffs, and blast beats quickly at the very end. So, yeah, and that's another thing I had an issue with this album, and kind of an issue I have with a lot of modern traditional melodic death metal bands, is that they tend to kind of stick to one gear for the most part, and also the songwriting can get very predictable and formulaic, and by the time I got to like the final couple of songs, I was like, okay, I kind of already know the gearbox that this band follows, and this was my first time checking these guys out. Not saying it's a bad gearbox, it's solid for what it is, but yeah, it can definitely get repetitive as the album goes on. But I will say one big positive, I like the gritty production on here. It doesn't feel overproduced. It doesn't feel unnatural. It felt natural, organic, but yet raw and filled with that, like, almost punk spirit of, like, the early melodic death metal bands. So it does have that old school charm to it when it comes to production. But overall, with all the pros and cons, I still think this was an enjoyable, solid listen. I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. It's definitely got some stuff that might grate on you after a little bit, but it's not bad. It's just, yeah, it can get a little bit predictable and formulaic as the album goes on, but it's still a good album nonetheless. But of course, those are just my opinions. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Keep your horns high and your dreams wet.